The rain fell hard that night, sharp, relentless. Like the world had something to mourn. Ella Jin clutched her old umbrella as she hurried down the dim alley behind her apartment building. The air smelled of wet pavement and rust. She had just finished her double shift at the bakery, her feet aching and her hands raw from hours of kneading dough. But she stopped suddenly. There, curled up beside a trash bin, was a man. Young, thin, drenched to the bone. He sat motionless, his back pressed to the wall, his clothes soaked through. His face was pale, his lips trembling. But it was his eyes that caught her breath. They were open, but unfocused, empty, blind. Ella hesitated. This city wasn't safe. People didn't stop for strangers anymore. But something in her heart wouldn't let her walk away. She knelt beside him, her voice soft. "Are you okay? Can you hear me?" He flinched slightly. I'm fine," he muttered, barely audible. "Just let me be." His voice was quiet, but laced with pride, the kind that came from someone who had lost everything but refused to admit it. She set her umbrella down over both of them and took off her scarf, gently placing it around his shoulders. "You're freezing," she said. "Let me help." He didn't speak, but he didn't push her away. She looked around. No one was coming. No one cared. Ella stood and held out her hand. "I live nearby, just a small place. You can rest for a bit. It's better than staying out here." The man hesitated. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand. It was trembling. She wrapped his arm around her shoulder and helped him to his feet. He was taller than she expected, but light, as if life had drained him slowly. They walked in silence through the alley, the rain still falling. Step by step, she guided him home, her arm around his back, his trust like fragile glass. When they reached her apartment, she led him inside, placed a towel over his shoulders, and sat him on the couch. The room was small, a single bed in the corner, a kettle on the counter, old posters on the wall, but it was warm. "I'm Ella," she said gently. He didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Ji-woon." She smiled. He couldn't see it. But somehow, she felt like he sensed it. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, two strangers shared a quiet moment of humanity. Neither of them knew it yet. But fate had just rewritten everything. Ji-woon sat still on Ella's worn-out couch, his fingers tightly curled over the edges of the towel she'd given him. His wet clothes clung to his skin. The scent of chamomile and something sweet lingered in the air. Maybe from the bakery boxes, stacked neatly by the window. Ella moved gently around the room, not saying much. But every action was full of quiet care. She brought out a spare set of her brother's old clothes, a sweatshirt and loose pants, and placed them beside him. "They might be a bit big," she said softly, "but they're dry." He didn't respond right away. Then, in a voice more hesitant than before, "Thank you." She paused, then gave him privacy, turning her back as he changed. When he was done, he sat again, quieter than before. His dark hair now fell over his eyes, dripping slightly. She handed him a cup of warm ginger tea, and knelt beside him with a small, stained kit. "Your arm's scratched. May I?" Ji-woon nodded once, slowly. She unwrapped the damp towel and gently cleaned the wound with a soft cloth. He flinched slightly at the sting, but said nothing. "You don't have to explain," she said, as she began to wrap the bandage. "But if you want to talk, I'm here." Ji-woon let out a faint breath, almost like a laugh, the kind that comes from someone not used to kindness. "You don't even know me." "No," Ella replied, "but I know what it's like to be alone." Silence fell between them like a fragile curtain. He sipped the tea. She returned to the kitchen and heated up leftover soup, placing a bowl in front of him. "Eat what you can," she said with a smile. He lifted the spoon slowly, carefully, and took a sip. His face relaxed slightly. "Good," he murmured. Her heart warmed at his reaction. She sat nearby, not too close, watching as he finished nearly the entire bowl. Afterward, she handed him a small pillow and a folded blanket. "You can sleep here tonight. I don't have much, but it's warm." He hesitated, fingers running over the fabric. "I don't want to be a burden." Ella shook her head. "You're just someone who needed help." Ji-woon lowered his head. That night, Ella lay in her bed across the room, watching as Ji-woon drifted into a restless sleep, his brow furrowed, as if even dreams weren't safe anymore. She didn't know who he was, where he came from, or what had broken him. But she knew this. She didn't want him to feel invisible anymore. As the city lights flickered outside, Ella whispered to the dark, "You're safe now." And for the first time in a long time, so was he. The days passed softly, like petals falling without sound. Ji-woon hadn't said much since the night he arrived. He remained quiet, polite, distant. But Ella noticed the small shifts, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he tilted his head toward the sounds of the outside world, the way his shoulders slowly relaxed when he sat in her presence. One morning, she found him sitting alone on the edge of the bed, his fingers gently tracing the edge of the blanket. "Do you want to go outside today?" she asked gently. Ji-woon turned his face slightly toward her voice. "Is it warm?" She smiled. "Very." She helped him to his feet, offering her arm again. He took it with less hesitation this time. Together, they stepped out into the morning sun. The city was just beginning to stir. Ella led him through the quiet streets to a nearby park, a place she often went to when she felt overwhelmed. It wasn't grand, but it was peaceful. Birds sang in the trees, children played in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of fresh flowers from a nearby stall. They sat beneath a tall tree near the walking path. Ella placed his hand on the bark. "Feel that. It's smooth here. But if you go higher, it gets rough." "I used to think trees were like people." "In what way?" Ji-woon asked. "Soft in places, tough in others. You never know where they've been hurt." Ji-woon was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Why are you helping me?" Ella glanced at him. "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing. And because you looked like you had no one." He didn't respond right away. But then, he surprised her. "I had people once, but they disappeared when I stopped being useful." The words hung between them like a wound reopened. She didn't press. Instead, she handed him a piece of sweetbread from her bag. "Try this. It's my favorite." He took a careful bite and nodded. "It's good." "That's a lot coming from someone who barely speaks," she teased. For the first time, Ji-woon smiled, just a flicker, but it reached his eyes. They spent the rest of the morning walking slowly through the park. Ella described the flowers, the fountain, the birds in silly voices that made Ji-woon chuckle under his breath. As they returned home, she asked, "If you could go anywhere right now, where would it be?" He didn't answer for a long time. Then softly, "Anywhere someone would see me, even if I couldn't see them." Ella didn't say anything. She just tightened her grip on his arm and kept walking beside him. He couldn't see her tears, but somehow he felt them. The morning started like any other. Ella woke early, the scent of warm bread and black coffee already filling the air. She moved around the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast, 2 bowls of kanji, lightly seasoned, just the way Ji-woon liked it. She looked toward the couch, where he usually rested. It was empty. At first, she thought he might be in the bathroom, or quietly standing by the window, as he sometimes did when the city was still asleep. But the window was shut. The bathroom door open. The folded blanket lay neatly on the couch. His clothes, the ones she had given him, were gone. The cup from last night's tea washed and placed upside down on the rack. Only one thing remained, the scarf she had wrapped around him on the night they met. Ella's hands trembled slightly as she picked it up. Ji-woon, she called. Silence. She checked outside. The hallway. The stairwell. Gone. Her heart began to race, unsure whether to panic or scream. She rushed back inside and scanned the room for a note. Anything. But there was nothing. Just the echo of his absence. The food on the stove began to burn. She turned it off and sank to the floor, holding the scarf tightly in her hands. Why he had said nothing, given no sign, just vanished. She thought back to the last few days, the way he had smiled at the park. How he had begun to ask questions. How his laughter, though rare, had become real. Was it all a lie? No, she didn't believe that, but it didn't matter. He was gone. And the silence he left behind was louder than any goodbye. Ella spent the rest of the day walking the routes they used to take together: the park path, the bakery alley, the bus stop nearby. She asked no one. She didn't even know his full name. She didn't know where he came from, who he was, or what demons he carried. All she knew was that he was blind. And alone. And now, so was she. That night, back in her apartment, she placed the scarf on the edge of the couch and stared at it for a long time. It was still warm, as if his presence had lingered just a little longer than his body had. Ella lay in bed with her eyes open, waiting for the sound of a knock, a voice, a sign. But none came. And somewhere in the quiet, a new kind of ache took root in her chest. One not of fear or anger, but of loss. Not just of someone she helped, but of someone she had started to care for. A month had passed since Ji-woon disappeared. Ella no longer searched the alleys or watched the park entrance with quiet hope. She had returned to her routines, baking before dawn, delivering boxes to clients, working part-time at a nearby hotel reception. Life moved forward, but the ache remained. She still kept the scarf on the edge of the couch, folded, waiting. It was a Thursday afternoon when her manager called her to assist a private event at the Grand Orion Hotel, the most luxurious place in the city. A corporate reception, no room for mistakes. She ironed her uniform, tied her hair, and kept her head down as she moved through the marble halls. The hotel lobby sparkled under chandeliers. Guests in designer suits walked past with practiced confidence. She blended into the background, invisible as ever, until she heard a voice. "We'll begin the announcement in 5 minutes." Her breath caught. That voice. She turned slowly toward the crowd gathering by the central stage. And then she saw him, Ji-woon. He stood tall, dressed in a sleek black suit, his hair styled perfectly. No glasses, no cane. No hesitation. His posture was strong, his movements sharp. He wasn't blind. Not anymore. Her heart pounded. He moved like a man in command, shaking hands, nodding to executives, flanked by assistants. A large digital screen flashed behind him. Jung Ji-woon, CEO, Mirai Tech Group. Ella stared in disbelief. The man she had bandaged, fed, sheltered. The man who said nothing about who he really was. She felt her knees weaken, but she forced herself to stay calm. This wasn't the alley. This wasn't her home. This was his world. And in his world, she didn't belong. She turned to leave, but froze. Schwoon's eyes had landed on her. And for a moment, the entire room blurred around them. His expression didn't change, but his eyes widened, just enough to betray him. Recognition. Shock. Ult. He took a step toward her. She stepped back. Then she did what she hadn't done the night he left. She walked away, fast, out the glass doors, into the street, into the noise. She didn't know where she was going. All she knew was this. The man she had saved was never who he claimed to be. And now that she knew the truth, she didn't know whether to cry or run. The rooftop of Myra Tech's headquarters was bathed in the soft orange glow of dusk. The city below sparkled with life, but up here it was quiet, isolated. Ji-woon stood at the edge, his hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the skyline, though his gaze drifted far beyond it. The elevator doors opened behind him. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. Why did you lie to me? Ella's voice cut through the silence like glass. He slowly turned around. She stood there in her simple clothes, no makeup, no designer bag, just raw emotion on her face. Her fingers gripped the scarf she had once wrapped around him. The same scarf he had folded and left behind. Ji-woon took a step toward her. I didn't mean to lie. You didn't mean to lie, she snapped. You let me believe you were blind, helpless, homeless. You let me give you everything. When you had everything. His jaw tightened. I was blind, temporarily. I was in an accident, just days before I met you. I left the hospital early, against orders. I didn't want anyone from my world to know. So I vanished. I had no plan, no one. She shook her head, disbelief in her eyes. So I was your hiding place. You were something I didn't expect. He moved closer. You didn't treat me like I was broken or pitiful. You were the only person who saw me. Ella's voice trembled. And yet, you didn't trust me with the truth. Ji-woon's expression softened with regret. I was afraid that if you knew who I really was, you'd leave. Or worse, treat me like everyone else does. And so you left first. Silence. She turned to walk away. Ella, wait, he called. You let me believe I was nothing to you, she said, not turning back. But you were everything to me. He took a step forward, rain starting to fall gently. As if the sky had heard what words couldn't finish. I never stopped thinking about you. You didn't even say goodbye. Ji-woon's voice cracked. Because I didn't think I deserved one. She paused, tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. You were right. And then, she walked into the elevator. The doors closed between them. And Ji-woon stood there, alone again. But this time, it wasn't because he had no one. It was because he had let go of the only person who truly saw him, and now, he had to face the weight of that truth. The rain had not stopped. Ella walked slowly through the dimly lit streets, her steps echoing off the puddled pavement. Her old umbrella, the same one she had used the night. She found Ji-woon shielded her from the storm, but it couldn't shield her from the ache in her chest. She had told herself she was over it, that Ji-woon had left, and that was the end. But seeing him again, seeing the truth behind the man she once saved, it reopened a wound she thought had already healed. He hadn't just lied. He had chosen silence when she offered him everything she had. She turned onto a quieter street, one lined with trees swaying gently in the wind. The world around her blurred behind the raindrops. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the umbrella. You were everything to me, she whispered to no one. Back in her apartment, the couch sat empty, exactly as he'd left it. The scarf was still there. She stared at it for a long time before finally picking it up, folding it neatly, and placing it in a drawer. This time, she didn't wait for him to come back. She wouldn't. The next morning, she returned to work. She kept her head down, answered politely, smiled when she had to. But something inside her had shifted. She wasn't angry. Not anymore. She was simply done. Meanwhile, in his penthouse office, Ji-woon sat by the window, watching the same rain fall on the same city, but from a tower so high it barely felt real. His assistant entered with a stack of papers. "You have a meeting in 10. Cancel it." "Sir." I said, "Cancel it." He stood abruptly and walked out, ignoring the stares. The elevator ride down felt endless. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to move, breathe, feel something again. He ended up in the same park where Ella had once described trees and laughter to him. Now the benches were wet, the paths empty. He sat anyway. And for the first time in years, Ji-woon cried, not because he was alone, but because he had met someone who saw him when he couldn't even see himself, and he let her slip away. The boy she saved was gone, and the man he was now didn't deserve her kindness. He had everything, and somehow he had nothing at all. Spring arrived quietly, as if the city had held its breath all winter. Ella stood in front of the community garden she'd volunteered at for years. Her hands were stained with soil, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. Children ran past her laughing, and the scent of blooming jasmine lingered in the air. Life had become simple again. Not easier, but clearer. She didn't wait anymore. Didn't wonder. Ji-woon's name had become something she didn't flinch at. Only something she remembered. Until the morning she received the envelope. No return address. Just her name, written in handwriting she knew too well. Inside, a letter and a single white rose pressed between the pages. "I was blind when you found me. Not just in my eyes, but in my heart. You didn't ask who I was. You only asked if I was okay. I left because I was a coward. But I've never stopped seeing you. If you can forgive me, I'll be waiting." Where it all began. No signature. She didn't need one. That evening, as the sun began to set, Ella returned to the alley where she'd first found him. The street lights blinked softly overhead. The same bakery trash bin sat crooked in the corner. The same smell of rain on concrete. And then she saw him. Ji-woon stood in the same spot, not in a suit. Not as a CEO, but in a simple shirt and coat. No assistants, no luxury. Just him. He turned when he heard her steps. "You came," he said. Ella nodded. "You wrote?" He smiled, not the charming kind he used at press conferences, but the quiet one she remembered from the park. He stepped closer and opened his hand. Inside it, a single white rose. No ring, no promises. Just a choice. She looked at the rose. Then at him. "Why now?" "Because I finally understand that love isn't about saving someone. It's about standing with them. You stood with me when I was nothing. I want to stand with you, now, not because I can give you the world, but because you gave it to me without asking anything in return." Ella was silent. Then, slowly, she reached out. Not for the rose, but for his hand. She took it gently. "Don't disappear again." "Never," he whispered. And just like that, two people who had met in the rain, not by fate, but by choice, began a new chapter. Not a fairy tale, but something real. Something earned. A Cinderella who didn't marry a prince. but chose the man who had finally learned how to love, with his eyes wide open.